With so many potential new teams on the horizon, NASCAR free agency is heating up. We're going to look at every open ride for next season, and I'm going to tell y'all which driver fills it. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. We have a special silly season episode in store for all of you, but first, this episode is sponsored by WorkPro Tools. In business since 2009, they offer a little bit of everything. Hand tools, power tools, tool storage and organization, carts, benches, accessories at a competitive value. WorkPro Tools cater to the DIYer and hand and power tool enthusiasts. As you can see, they've absolutely hooked me up. They're huge supporters of Out of the Groove and huge supporters of NASCAR. They're sponsoring 8 NASCAR Xfinity Series races this year, so they're throwing their support all over stock car racing. You can check them out at Amazon.com. Their Amazon store link is down in the description below. Go check out WorkPro Tools for all your home maintenance, woodworking, and do-it-yourself needs. That's WorkPro Tools. Check out that Amazon link down in the description below. Not to get too cliche, but 2021 truly is the end of an era. Once the calendar in December flips to January of 2022, we will be in the first year of the next gen car era. Car that's going to handle completely differently, going to drive completely differently, going to race completely differently, and is going to completely change the NASCAR team ownership business model. And as a result, we've seen several new NASCAR Cup Series teams expressed sincere interest in joining the NASCAR Cup Series full time next year. Kaulig Racing, one of the top teams in the Xfinity Series, has expressed repeatedly their intents on fielding at least one full-time Cup Series ride next season. Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Junior Motorsports have even expressed some interest, at least, in joining the Cup Series next year. Other new teams to the 2021 season, like Trackhouse 2311, have discussed their intentions on expanding to a 2 or even a 3-car team as early as next season. So while we've talked about some of the new teams joining the Cup Series in 2021, 2022 is bound to get even crazier because all these new rides, all these new cars, many of which for very competitive teams, need drivers. There's a very good shot we will see 40-car fields more often than not next season at the rate things are going. So today on Out of the Groove, we're going to discuss all the latest NASCAR silly season rumors and reports, and I'm going to predict what driver gets every available ride for the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series season. So let's do this. Let's start by talking about Team Penske, and let's begin with their, I guess you could say, their flagship car, the 2 car. There's been a lot of uncertainty around Team Penske's 2022 driver lineup. It was first reported by motorsport.com over a month ago that Brad Keselowski, 2012 Series champion for Penske in that 2 car, would be leaving the team after this season to go join a rival organization. By all accounts, that seems to be a done deal. Brad Keselowski more than likely will not be with Team Penske in 2022, so that frees up a very competitive seat over at Penske. Who gets it? My pick is Austin Cindric, the defending NASCAR Xfinity Series champion. He's got a couple of wins this season. He's one of the Xfinity Series championship favorites this year as well. He's made a few Cup Series starts already this season, driving the 33 car for Team Penske. I know a year ago it was reported that he would take over the 21 car in 2022, for the Wood Brothers, a Penske affiliate team. But I think plans are fluid. I think things can and will change. With Brad Keselowski leaving Penske at the end of this season, I think Austin Cindric, the son of Tim Cindric, who is the president of Team Penske, I think he's the top candidate to drive that 2 car. I think now that they have the space for him, I think they're going to bring Austin Cindric in-house, or I guess keep him in-house since he's already in their Penske Xfinity organization. I believe Austin Cindric will drive the 2 car next season. Be interested to see what kind of start he gets off to. The rookies the last couple of years typically get off to slow starts. Like, playoffs are kind of turning into unrealistic expectations, even for rookies in competitive race cars. But we'll see. I think in a Penske car, I think Cindric can be a serious playoff contender, especially with how many road courses will likely be on the schedule next year. So my pick for the 2 is Austin Cindric. So that means who gets the 21 car? Who will drive for the famed Wood Brothers next year? Cindric was originally the top candidate. I'll just say quite simply, I think Matt DiBenedetto is the luckiest son of a gun on planet Earth. With Brad Keselowski leaving Penske and that spot opening up for Austin Cindric, I think Matt DiBenedetto will stay in the 21 car for another season. Now, his contract with the Wood Brothers is not public, but reports suggest that they have a team option to extend DiBenedetto for another year. I think they'll do that. I think the Wood brothers are already preparing for another year of Matt DiBenedetto. I mean, just last week, they swapped crew chiefs out mid-season. Greg Irwin, gone. They brought in Jonathan Hassler beginning with the All-Star race this past weekend. That may not mean anything, but to me, it feels like they want to give DiBenedetto and Hassler some time to work together so that they can hit the ground running for sure by 2022. But even this year, they're not out of it yet. Matt DiBenedetto is 17th in points. He is 60 points outside the top 16, but still within striking distance if they can turn things around here in this final summer stretch. The team seems to really like him. I think he sticks around because of that opening at Penske going to Austin Cindric. Now let's talk about Brad Keselowski, the guy who set this whole thing off by reportedly leaving Team Penske at the end of this year. All reports suggest Brad Keselowski will join Roush Fenway Racing as not just a driver, but also as an owner. Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, RFK Racing, is the reported new name of that team beginning in 2022. Now, I haven't seen confirmed anywhere what number race car Brad Keselowski will drive at Roush, but I believe it will be the 6 car. I think Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing remains a 2-car organization, and I think with Ryan Newman's contract expiring, I think Brad Keselowski will slide nicely into the 6 car next season. So that's my pick for the 6. Brad Keselowski takes it over, and speaking of Ryan Newman, unfortunately, I think this may be the end of his illustrious NASCAR Cup Series career. Rookie of the Year winner, Daytona 500 champion. He's won many, many races, driving for several different race teams, but he is one of the oldest drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series, and I believe he will be 44 years old by the time next season starts. I just don't see any other teams giving Ryan Newman a shot, especially when it's a brand new race car and there are a lot of pretty talented young drivers that are likely cheaper than Ryan Newman waiting in the wings to fill those seats. I just don't see Newman getting an opportunity next year unless Roush does open a 3rd team and puts Keselowski in a different number. They bring back, the 16, or that's probably going to go to Kaulig, or the 97, or the 26. I don't know. I don't see Roush going to a 3-car team. I think Ryan Newman retires. Now let's touch on a few other teams really quick. The 48 car at Hendrick Motorsports still technically does not have a driver lined up for the 2022 season. That's right, Alex Bowman's on a 1-year deal, and I know a few weeks ago after his Dover win, Rick Hendrick said, oh yeah, re-signing Alex Bowman, that's just a formality, we'll get it done. It's been a month and no word about Alex Bowman's future with the team. Ally is still signed on through 2023. They seem to really like Alex Bowman, at least if their social media posts are any indication, but we still haven't gotten any confirmation that Alex Bowman will be their driver next year. But if you ask me, he probably will. He's got 2 wins this season. He's one of only like 3 drivers in the Cup Series this year with multiple wins. Hendrick as an organization is clicking, firing on all cylinders right now. I don't see why you'd want to mix that up in any major way. Assuming Ally are good fans of Alex Bowman, I think Alex Bowman will stay in that 48 car next year. What will be interesting to me is if he signs like a 2-year deal so that he stays with Hendrick as long as Ally's with Hendrick and they'll renegotiate in a couple years, or if they stick him with another 1-year deal as they've been doing the last season or 2. We'll see what happens to Alex Bowman, but I believe he will stay at Hendrick. But it is still a little weird to me that they have not signed him to an extension yet. Like, just gotten that out of the way. Just clear the air about that. It's a little strange to me. Anyway, moving on. Another team whose future is completely unknown at this point is the number 10 Stewart-Haas Racing ride. Eric Almirola has driven it since 2018, I believe. He won a race in 2018, but he's currently in the middle of, by far, the worst season of his NASCAR career. And I think Mike Joy or Jeff Gordon said on the broadcast this weekend, one of the worst seasons by any, top contender. Stewart-Haas Racing is one of the 4 best teams, theoretically, in NASCAR that he's ever seen. Eric Almirola is 28th in points. He only has 1 top 10 this entire season. A lot of it has been bad luck. A lot of it has just been no speed. The SHR cars across the board have struggled this season. There really hasn't been any speculation about Eric Almirola's future. All reports suggest that last year they signed a 1-year extension, so he's once again in a contract year. Smithfield, his longtime sponsor, slightly scaled back their support this year. Rather than being the primary for 30 races, I believe they reduced that number to 25. Still a huge number, still one of the great driver-sponsor partnerships in the Cup Series today, but just worth noting it's a little bit less than it had been in years past. I think, honestly, if Smithfield is willing to sign on for 25 or more races again, SHR keeps Eric Almirola in that car. But if for some reason Smithfield drops Almirola completely or severely reduces their sponsorship, their endorsement, I think that 10 car could be open, or even that charter could be leased at some point if SHR is not comfortable putting, Riley Herbst or someone else in that seat. Because that's the thing, Ford and SHR's development system right now is is pretty thin. So if you want my prediction, I think Eric Almirola stays in the 10 for another season, but that's far from a sure thing at this point, especially given just how bad that whole season has been for that race car. Now let's talk about a non-charter team that's run all the races except the All-Star race up until this point. JTG Daugherty's number 37, driven this year by Ryan Preece. Remember, this team does not have a charter, and they've already said they likely will not run the full schedule. They'll probably sit out the final 10 races of the season. They may not run it in the playoffs. I only mention this team because they're a non-charter team and because Ryan Preece's contract situation seems fluid, is really not known by the public in any way. This is really a shot in the dark, but to me, especially if many of these other teams we'll talk about in a minute do in fact race next season, many without a charter, I think the 37 team effectively shuts down at the end of this season. I think JTG Daugherty will switch to a single car team, and I don't know what that means for Ryan Preece. He's run some modified tour races this year. That's where he comes from. That's where he earned his stripes and was very successful for many, many years. Perhaps he goes back and does that full time or more consistently. Perhaps he does land with another team in the Xfinity or Truck Series. I could see Ryan Preece doing something similar to what John Hunter Nemechek has done this year. I think John Hunter Nemechek has completely revitalized his image by dipping down to the trucks, and now he's got like 4 wins. He's the best driver in that series by a wide margin, it seems. Ryan Preece, I think, is a talented race car driver. Modifieds, Cup cars, Xfinity. I think he's talented. He's won in NASCAR before in the Xfinity Series. He's talented, but he's not going anywhere with JTG Daugherty, and especially if that team can't even run the full schedule, I think it's smart for him to be looking elsewhere anyway. So we'll see what happens to Ryan Preece. Doesn't bring much funding, it sounds like, so we'll see if he lands another NASCAR ride or not, but that's my prediction, is that the 37 car just, maybe they run a few races, maybe they run like the super speedways or something, but I don't see JTG Daugherty being a true 2-car team for much of next season. Let's go from one current 2-car team to another, Chip Ganassi Racing. There's a real shot that 1 car will be available at the end of this season, and according to The Athletic, Kurt Busch is expected to join 2311 Racing next year. We'll talk more about that as a possibility in a second, because it sounds like Kurt Busch has a few enticing offers on the table, including Chip Ganassi Racing. Kurt said last week that he's going to begin his contract talks with Chip Ganassi because he respects the team. He's enjoyed driving for him. He's won for them twice in the last 2.5 years. But this is going to be interesting because some of those other options Kurt Busch has, I think, are really, really intriguing. I don't think he returns to Chip Ganassi next year, and that's going to make things hard for Chip Ganassi Racing because more than likely Monster Energy will go wherever Kurt Busch goes. So if they lose Kurt, and therefore probably lose Monster Energy, Chip Ganassi Racing will have lost Credit One Bank and Monster Energy in back-to-back seasons. That's brutal for that team. Now, they've signed some other sponsors here and there to help fill some of those gaps, but still losing 2 major partners 2 years in a row, that's going to hurt that team financially. And if they're going to keep that 1 car around full-time, you remember leasing or selling that charter is always a possibility, but if they're going to keep that ride around, I think they're going to need to bring in a driver who has some funding. And so I'm looking around, I'm scouring the Xfinity Series for young drivers that might have some funding, that also seem to have some talent and perhaps have some connections to Chevrolet. And the leading candidate, in my opinion, is Justin Haley. He's made some Cup Series starts. He's technically a NASCAR Cup Series winner already, but he was in the Championship 4 driving for Kaulig in Xfinity last year. He's driven for Spire in Cup this season, and both Ganassi and Spire kind of have a relationship, a working relationship together. So Justin Haley's certainly in the loop when it comes to future Chip Ganassi drivers, potentially. This is also kind of a shot in the dark, but assuming Kurt Busch does in fact leave, as reports suggest, I think Justin Haley will drive the number 1 Chevrolet next season. All right, we've hit on all the existing teams and what I think is going to happen to them next season, but now let's talk about the several new cars, new race teams that have all been reported to at least be considering opening race cars in 2022. Let's begin with Kaulig Racing. Matt Kaulig has been bullish. He said that Kaulig plans to run at least 1, maybe more, full-time cars in the Cup Series this coming season, and they have said that they're willing to race with or without a charter. So I think we will see at least 1 full-time Kaulig race car next year. Who drives it? It sounds like Matt Kaulig, Chris Rice, they already have a short list of drivers they're considering, and as was discussed publicly a couple weeks ago after AJ Allmendinger won at Mid-Ohio, Allmendinger, a veteran race car driver, is high up on that short list, according to Matt Kaulig himself. Now, I mentioned Justin Haley may go to Ganassi, that's just my prediction, but Justin Haley already drives for Kaulig Racing in the Xfinity Series. They've also had connections to Kaz Grala. He's made some Cup Series starts for them already this season. They're running a part-time schedule, so definitely I could see Kaulig going going with a younger driver like Kaz Grala. Maybe they're able to grab Justin Haley and offer him something better than Ganassi can offer him. But if you want my prediction, I'm going out on a limb on this one. I think AJ Allmendinger will land a full-time ride with Kaulig Racing next year. And I think they'll sign him to maybe like a 2-year deal. He's 39 years old now. He'll be 40 by the time next year starts. So it's getting up there. It's older than your average NASCAR Cup Series driver, but with so many road courses being added to the NASCAR schedule, with next year's next-gen cars handling kind of like a sports car, that's what people have said, those who've tested it, I think that fits nicely into AJ Allmendinger's wheelhouse. I think Kaulig would be foolish to not give AJ Allmendinger the first phone call and see if he's interested. Because I think AJ Allmendinger, if he joins Kaulig next year, and remember, Kaulig will likely be, RCR level equipment, they have a pretty close alliance with them, I think AJ Allmendinger makes the playoffs. I think he wins a race next year if he races for Kaulig full-time. He's run a couple road courses for Kaulig this year in the Cup Series, and he's finished in the top 10 both times. In fact, he got a top 5 at, I believe it was at Coda. He had a top 5 at Coda. I'd love to see Allmendinger in the Cup Series for at least one more full-time season, and if he joins Kaulig, that'll be a better race car than what he drove with JTG Daugherty. So look for Allmendinger to make some noise next year if this happens. Let's talk about 23XI Racing. I think it's safe to say that their inaugural season has not gone quite according to plan. They still do not have a top 10 on their resume just yet, but that hasn't stopped Denny Hamlin, Michael Jordan, and that whole team from discussing expansion. Hamlin seems hell-bent on opening up a second full-time car next season, and recently he said that's with or without a charter. So it sounds like this is something that's likely to happen. He has not given any indication as to who his first choice as a driver will be, but again, going back to that report from The Athletic, Kurt Busch appears to be the front runner. Now, I mentioned Kurt Busch, 2004 Series champion, has several interesting offers. Chip Ganassi Racing is certainly going to make an offer to try to keep him there, try to get him to stay. 23XI Racing has put forth an offer. And also, according to Kurt Busch himself, Trackhouse has reached out already. And we'll talk more about Trackhouse in a minute. But if you ask me, I think 23XI Racing makes the most sense for Kurt Busch. Trackhouse, another team that's sort of on that RCR level when it comes to equipment, they've been pretty fun to watch this year. But if you have the choice between working with, Daniel Suarez, and yeah, Justin Marks is really cool, Pitbull's involved, that's a cool team over there. But would you rather work with that team, or would you rather go to 23XI, Toyota, work with Denny Hamlin, Michael Jordan, Bubba Wallace, and likely get to sit in on many of the same meetings that Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, Martin Truex Jr. sit in on? Those are some powerful teammates over at Toyota. To me, that just makes a whole lot more sense. I mean, keep in mind, Kurt Busch would get the chance to work pretty closely alongside his younger brother, Kyle Busch, something that neither have gotten to do during their Cup Series careers. Unless something surprising happens and the Kurt Busch deal falls through, I think Kurt Busch will join the new 23XI Racing car. If Kurt Busch doesn't get that ride, I'll bet they go with a younger driver like a John Hunter Nemechek, who's lighting up the truck series right now. Maybe they go with someone a little older like Matt DiBenedetto if for some reason he doesn't get to stay at the 21 car. I could see that happening as well. Hamlin seems to be a big fan of his, but I think Kurt Busch gets that second Toyota seat. Speaking of Trackhouse, let's talk about Trackhouse Racing. Their first full-time season, Daniel Suarez is their main driver, but recently Justin Marks said on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio that they're planning to expand to a second car next season, or at least looking for the opportunity to expand to a two-car team next season. No word on whether or not they feel they need a charter to do it or not, what their business looks like behind the scenes, but they sound like they're going to be aggressive this offseason. Aggressive enough to actually speak to legitimate championship-level drivers. As I mentioned, they've apparently reached out to Kurt Busch. I'm sure they've reached out to other drivers as well. I think Trackhouse is going to end up landing a younger, lesser experienced driver next season. But I do think they will field a full-time car. I do think that they will get a car on the track, a second car on the track for 36 races next year. I think it's going to be an existing Chevy driver. If you want to go way out on a limb, maybe like Josh Berry. I don't think Myatt Snider, who drives for RCR currently in the Xfinity Series, is ready to make that jump into the Cup Series by any means. Maybe they take a shot with Zane Smith or Brett Moffitt. Ooh, that'd be kind of fun. Maybe Justin Marks. I think he said before he's not planning on driving, but Justin Marks is only 39, 40 years old. He's raced a lot of different race cars in his career. Maybe Justin Marks even gets behind the wheel. That's probably not going to happen. Again, Trackhouse, much like Kaulig, they are closely aligned with Richard Childress Racing. I think they're going to go with an RCR type driver. I think Kaz Grala will get this seat. Sort of like musical chairs with some of those RCR Chevy drivers. Kaz Grala turned a ton of heads when he filled in for Austin Dillon at the Daytona Road Course last year and finished inside the top 10. He's really young, not a lot of experience in NASCAR, period, but he is clearly a really good road course racer, and I just think with where the schedule is heading, that's valuable to a lot of new teams. So I think Hasgrala lands the second Trackhouse car. Assuming Trackhouse starts up a new team, I wonder what their car number will be. Some people are saying maybe 97 if they get Kurt Busch to come over there. That'd be kind of nostalgic. Now the last team we have to talk about here today is Junior Motorsports, because Dale Earnhardt Jr. has said publicly that it's now or never if Dale Jr. is going to take his Xfinity Series team to Cup. They've seriously considered, with the next gen car on the horizon, they've been considering what it would take to get that team into the NASCAR Cup Series. I think if this team goes Cup Series racing next year, Justin Allgaier will probably be near the top of the list. They'll probably need some funding, and Allgaier seems to have very loyal sponsorship support. I know Dale Jr. loves his boy Josh Berry, but man, if he can't get a full-time Xfinity gig for Josh Berry lined up, I'd be shocked if they get a full-time Cup Series ride for him just like that. Maybe Noah Gragson, but I need to see more from him. His 2021 season has been pretty abysmal so far. So if you ask me, honestly, I don't think Dale Earnhardt Jr. brings Junior Motorsports to Cup next season. I think they stay in Xfinity. They continue to be a force in the lower series. I just don't think it's going to work out. They sound the least confident out of all these other new teams we've been talking about their chances of going Cup racing. For them, it's sort of like a, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, I don't know. All these other teams, they're like, yeah, we're trying to make it happen. Junior Motorsports doesn't sound that confident. I'm not confident as a result. So sorry, Junior fans, I don't think we're going to see Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s team in the Cup Series next year, but they could surprise me. I just rattled off a few drivers that might be likely candidates, maybe someone we're not even thinking of, but I just don't think it happens. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Does Junior Motorsports go Cup racing next year? What do you think about the revolving door at Team Penske? What do you think about Ganassi? Can they hold on to Kurt Busch? What driver can they get to replace him? Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. I appreciate y'all tuning into this episode, and thank you again to Work Pro Tools for sponsoring this episode. Check out their link down in the description, their Amazon store. Be sure to give them a look. That's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. I could not do this show without your tremendous support each and every month. It really means a lot to me. It really helps keep Out of the Groove growing and has helped make this show what it is today. I really appreciate it. I will be at Nashville Super Speedway this weekend, all 3 days. I can't wait to film a bunch of it, share it with you guys. Gonna be a ton of fun. If you see me at the track, feel free to come say hi. That's all I've got for this episode. Have a fantastic rest of your day, y'all. I'll see you in the next one.